So I've been talking about kid video as of late, and not just to talking about Carla or Carly as part of my Anime Girls Profile Confidential series, but also about the series itself. And I've been kind of basing my thoughts off of what I've been hearing from Rob the Wonderful, Rowdy Sea of TV Trash, and even to an extent Secret Galaxy and many others. I've been basing my thoughts off what I've heard from them and even what I've read online. And it got me thinking, there was another series, if you will, that kind of wanted a piece of that, at the time, that newly christened, nectar-flavored, I guess you could say, cable channel known as MTV. It got me thinking about there was someone else. Now, we know about now, for anybody that grew up in the 80s, you know about DTV. You know about Disney Music Television, DTV for short. And even its I guess you could say, descendant, DTV2. Basically, they tried to do like a soft reboot on it, years after it debuted. And they tried to use more modern music, or at least music over the past decade at that time frame, decade and a half. And, again, everybody that grew up in the 80s knew about them. And I do apologize if I'm kind of all over the place right now. I'm walking home, not walking home, but I'm walking to the bus stop here in Patterson from, my first day back at the place I've been at for the past 2 holiday seasons. It's now going to make it a third. But anyway, to get back on topic, like I said, anybody that grew up in the 80s knew about DTV. They knew about DTV2, like I said, the soft reboot continuation, from Disney. And we all know that it was created as Disney's answer to MTV. Again, like I said, they wanted that sweet MTV pie because MTV was the new kid on the block. They were that sweet new nectar pie that nobody could get enough of. And Disney wanted a piece of that. NBC, through the help of Deke Entertainment and Saban, Chaim Saban, that is, the same person behind Power Rangers, they too wanted a piece of that, and they got it through Kid Video. But they weren't the only ones. And that's why we're going to get to the subject of this video here. They weren't the only ones because in the mid-80s, during the syndicated and I think TBS run, the syndicated and TBS run of the future of the, not future world, but the Funtastic World, that's the word I'm looking for, the Funtastic World of Hanna-Barbera. During that initial, initial couple of year run in syndication and on TBS, and I think even for a time on USA Network, during that run and everything, basically Hanna-Barbera, and this was at a time when they had a primary partnership with Turner, but they were also partnered with syndicated networks and channels and broadcast networks and, even other cable outlets like USA. But the primary partner was, Turner. And they decided during the initial few-year run in syndication and on TBS of the Funtastic World of Hanna-Barbera, they decided that they too wanted a piece of the MTV pie. So what did they do? During basically certain filler portions, if you will, like basically between episodes of different, basically between episodes of different shows. That's what I'm trying to say. But basically between those time frames, instead of just showing commercials, which I'm sure you got a lot of with the syndicated version, but when it came to the Turner version, from what I can tell, you didn't get that many commercials, if at all. Hold on for a sec. Like I said, you didn't get that many commercials, if at all. And what happened to fill, to fill the gap, if you will, to fill the gap at that time, Hanna-Barbera decided that they could outdo Disney when it came to basically their version or their answer to MTV. And thus, in between certain shows, if you will, like let's say Yogi's Treasure Hunt, maybe the Flintstone Family Hour or whatever, or the Flintstone Comedy Show, whatever, the Pebbles and Bambas, whatever they had on the Fantastic World of that time frame. You know, in between it, you know, in between certain shows and their episodes, they would air to fill in time, mostly on the TBS run of the Fantastic World. They would fill in time by, like I said, putting in the equivalent of DTV. Basically, like I said, they wanted to outdo Disney. They wanted to Disney by doing their own equivalent of MTV. Again, showing that they too wanted a piece of that MTV pie. You know, that's you know, basically, you know what, you know, that's basically how, I'm trying to find the right word to say, that's basically how what became known as HBTV came about. HBTV being short for Hanna-Barbera Music Television. And essentially, the presentation was very similar, you know, to DTV. The only difference is they used Hanna-Barbera characters and shows, Hanna-Barbera movies and shows. You know, that was the only difference. Disney had a whole, I guess you could say, lineup, you know, at their disposal, not just animated-wise, but live-action-wise. They had a whole lineup, a whole peripheral of titles and characters and movies and animated shorts, you know, that they could put into compilations, if you will. You know, they could put into compilations. Hold on for a sec. Like I said, they could put into compilations, you know, as music videos. You know, they can mix in animated, you know, clips from the movies and shows, along with live action clips from whatever movies they owned or whatever movies were in public domain, you know, at that time. Hanna-Barbera, they didn't have that luxury, you know, so to speak. They didn't have that luxury, but they did have a massive, unlimited amount of content, you know, with all their animated shows and movies with their characters that they could put in to a similar situation, and they did. And a lot of the songs they used were basically the same songs that Disney would use and license for DTV. You know, basically Bill and Joe would say, okay, Disney, you know, what was his name? Michael Eisner, I think, or whoever was in charge at the time, Frank Wells. They said, okay, fine. You guys think you're the only ones that could spend money and license out certain music and everything for your animated music videos or animated hybrid live action music videos? Guess what? We'll show you. And that's what they did. They basically decided to do the same thing. They splurged. They spent money maybe they shouldn't have spent, or maybe they convinced Turner, who at that time was the primary partner, you know, for Fantastic World, because it was also in syndication. You know, they probably had him help them out, and they too were able to acquire, you know, the license to utilize the same kind of songs in their music videos, mostly animated music videos, that is, featuring their characters. Characters like the Flintstones, characters like the Jetsons, characters like Scooby-Doo, characters like Yogi Bear and Cindy Bear, you name it. All the Hanna-Barbera characters that existed up to that point were used, you know, in compilation clips for music videos for HBTV, which again was short for Hanna-Barbera Music Television. And again, it was used, I don't know if I mentioned this, I've been trying to record this several times on the way to the bus stop here. Basically, these music videos were used mostly, I think, on the Turner broadcast, the TBS broadcast of the Fantastic World, not the syndicated one, but the TBS version. They were used to fill in time between, you know, the different shows, you know, after one would end and before another would begin. Like I said, they would do this to fill in the gaps between, you know, when one show would end and another would begin. Because, like I said, you would have, like, let's say Yogi's Treasure Hunt, and you would have the Snorks or the Smurfs, or you would have, like I said, classic Flintstones, like the new Fred and Barney Hour, or the Pebbles and Bam Bam show and stuff. You would have these things you would have these music videos fill in those gaps on the TBS version. And obviously it was a big hit, because not that long after, Hanna-Barbera, you know, I think it was through either Warner Archive, no, it was through Worldwide Vision. It was through Worldwide Vision Home Video. Hanna-Barbera like Disney themselves, Hanna-Barbera decided, yeah, they basically decided, yeah, Disney, you can do this whole Disney DTV, so can we. You can spend the money to get, the license to use this music in your little animated music videos and stuff, so can we. And guess what? Just like you, we can also make compilation VHSs we can sell. And that's what they did. And they sold, according to Wikipedia, 4 volumes worth. That's right, they sold 4 volumes worth of, the HBTV music videos and compilation VHSs. 4 volumes worth. And that's a lot of songs. That's like six songs, I believe. 6 music videos each. But they sold them through World Vision Home Entertainment or World Vision Home Video to compete with Disney. But yeah, long story short, that's how surprisingly, the long forgotten, unless you look really hard on YouTube or Internet Archive, the long forgotten, almost lost media of Hanna-Barbera Music Television, HBTV, came about. They came about, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, they came about as an answer to Disney's DTV, which was an answer, just like Kid Video's animated show was, an answer to MTV. And again, they wanted to show that they could be on that level of Disney, that they can outdo Disney at their own game. And you would expect something like this from, let's say, Warner Brothers with Looney Tunes, and I think they did do that as well. But not entirely sure. I have to go back and look. But Hanna-Barbera did. They did. And Warner Brothers, believe it or not, does have those HBTV music videos in their possession right now, but they have them locked up due to licensing reasons. Like I said, that's what Hanna-Barbera did. They basically tried to outdo Disney at their own game. All the way through. And like I said, you would expect something like this from Warner Brothers with the Looney Tunes, but we never got that. But we got it from Hanna-Barbera. And like I was saying, before I had to pause there because I had to cross the street. But like I was saying, Warner Brothers has these music videos locked up in their vault, but they have, and the reason they do is because of licensing fees. But what's crazy is I think the WMG, Warner Music Group, I think they do own the rights to some of those songs used, so if they wanted to, they could pop out some of those music videos, those HBTV music videos, anytime they wanted, but they're not doing it. But like I said, they're not doing it. But as I said at the beginning, in closing, this is how, when you really look at it, this is how basically the long forgotten and long-lost media version, well, I wouldn't say long-lost media because like I mentioned earlier, you can find it on YouTube and maybe Internet Archive, but the long-lost, almost long-lost, I put it that way, media known as HBTV came about. But anyway though guys, I just wanted to come on here and talk about that while I was walking to Walmart to the bus stop over here so I can get on the bus to go home after my first day back at the place I've been at for the past few years. I'm back again. But let me know what your thoughts are overall on what I've had to say. Comment down below, like the video, ring the bell for notifications, and until next time guys, I am out.